And I'm Emma, and welcome to Women in Sport.
On today's show, which is being produced and run by women, we're talking about women's experiences in sport. So Emma, we've both got an interest in sport and have both realised the huge inequality within this sector. What has your experience been with this?
So it started from a young age really. I was really good at competitive swimming and I always wanted to compete in the longer events. However, for women I could only compete in the 800 metres. For men, I think they had events like the 1500 and it never clicked to me until now, like how much, I don't know, it's so mad how like women can only compete up to a certain amount of metres, and obviously more recently at university I've picked the sports module and there's literally just me in a class full of lads.
Which is crazy,
and it's absolutely mad. Like it was offered to the whole year group and it makes me question why people don't gravitate towards sports. What about yourself?
So kind of similar, like I grew up playing multiple sports, running and football especially, and my dad ran a football group and my brother was a part of it, but this was like for boys about 5 years older than me, but we really struggled to find myself a girls only football group, so I used to have to go along, which I did enjoy, but go along with them a couple of times a week, as that was the only kind of way I could play, which it's just kind of crazy how there isn't that opportunities. And
yeah, that's really sad as well. Like, do you still play football now, or did that kind of put you off?
I guess it did kind of put me off. It kind of like there wasn't my friends like my age group or anything like that, so I think that's why I now do just really solely running, because it's not that group sport and you don't have to really rely on there being options available. But
and I know, like, here on Quays TV you're the only female that presents Blow the Whistle.
Yeah.
Speak a little bit about that.
Well, it's a bit like you, I guess, in the sports module. It's just kind of baffling how there isn't. I don't know if it's because women don't want to. I don't know if it's stemmed from younger having that, like, there's not that representation really, is there, of women in sport, especially when we was younger. So I don't know, like, I don't mind it, but it's just kind of crazy how that's how it is, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And why do you think girls might not want to get involved with sports?
I guess it's kind of a bit like what I just said, like, if they're not seeing regularly women represented in these sports and these TVs, it's kind of like not puts them off, but they're not seeing that as an option for themselves. Like, what do you think?
Well, I was going to say, like, obviously speaking from personal experiences, the one reason why I stopped swimming was because I kind of compared myself to other people's bodies, and like how I thought I should look, because I'm not the smallest girl in the world. I used to be quite broad and stuff like that, and compared to some of the other female swimmers, I used to look at them on social media and stuff like that, and I think a lot of that, like, body image, I did struggle a little bit with that. And obviously being a woman, we deal with periods as well, and that obviously definitely has an impact.
Yeah, I feel like you said, like the periods thing especially, and the body image, it's really not spoken about as kind of like a barrier for women in sports, and it's kind of just expected to, you're meant to carry on, or because you do see a lot of girls growing up, they're in sport and then they get to the teenage years and it just kind of end, and I think it's because they don't really realise, and it's not shown to them that there is options and you can continue and things like this. But anyway,
I know. Anyway, here at Quays TV we have lots of shows looking into sports, and this term a new show started all about motorsport, hosted by Natalie Durkin and Darcy Jackson. We popped along this morning after their show to hear all about it. Hello, and thank you for chatting to us.
Firstly, why did you decide to start the Motorsports Chat Show?
So I've always loved motorsport and watched it growing up, and I started making content on like social media about motorsport, and I've always loved talking about it. So when I came to uni and they've got like the TV studio and Quays TV, I like pitched the idea and they said yes, so I've started producing, and obviously I got Darcy to help out. So yeah, it's been really fun so far. Yeah, I've enjoyed it.
And why do you think it's important that women get involved in conversations about motorsport?
I think it's just such a male-dominated sport. It's important to have the balance, and because there's not as many women sort of in the sport at the minute, you know, I think that it's something that needs to change. And I think these conversations are starting to be had, but yeah, I do think something needs to change.
So why do you think there is more coverage of the men's motorsport compared to the women's?
So there is not a lot of racing series that have like women in them. There's Extreme E, which is electric rallying, that is the first motorsport series that's gender equal. It's got a man and a woman on each team, which is great. There's F1 Academy, which is an all-new single-seater racing series with women in. That's starting this year. But otherwise, there's not really a lot for people to watch that have women in motorsport. So I think there's starting to become a change with more women being included. And Sophia Flörsch is a female. She's the only female on the F3 grid. She joined this year. That's a big step, but definitely more needs to happen.
It's great that they're getting many women involved, but do you think the sport is as equal as it could be between men and women?
Absolutely not. No. I think, like Natalie mentioned with Sophia Flörsch, the F3 grid's got over 30 drivers on. She's the only female on the grid. It's like you don't see women in many of the feeder series going up to F1. You know, there's never been a female F1 driver. So I think even like taking out of the racing as well, when you look at the presenting teams, it's like there's still more men on the presenting teams, and it is changing, I suppose, like from a few years ago to now there is a lot more women involved. But yeah, I do think that even like when you look at all the F1 teams, when you look at the garages and stuff, it's full of like male engineers and things like that. So I think more conversations need to be had, not just in like women in STEM, but also like on the wider sort of field, I guess.
More representation of women, I think, is what we need to see. I know if I was a young girl watching motorsport, to see even just female presenters makes a huge difference, to look up to that and think, oh, I could work within that industry or even race.
Yeah. No, definitely. And obviously we've just established so much more needs to be done. So what do you think could be done that will make it a bit more equal?
Well, I think with the new championship starting, it's quite a big step, but there just needs to be more funding really for
100%,
female racing. It does start a lot lower down with like karting, getting more like young girls involved in karting at a young age, and funding them so they can build up to the single seaters and then eventually get into like F3 and F2 and work the way up. But yeah, I'd definitely say funding's a huge part of it, and that's what's the biggest problem, I'd say.
I think there's something called FIA Girls on Track, and it's like a big group and like a big community, and it's where, you know, you've got like female karters and people want to get into presenting and STEM and things like that, and it's just this massive like community of people, of girls sort of, you know, our age and younger and even older, and that's definitely helping to sort of get people involved at a higher level. So I think that more groups and things like that would be a good thing to have.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. And last time on the show we looked at female inspirations because of International Women's Day. Have you got any inspirations yourselves?
I'd say for me, because I started watching with Natalie Pinkham as like a main presenter for females for Sky Sports, I'd say she's definitely a big inspiration for me growing up watching her. Interacting with the drivers and having such wide knowledge on motorsport is great. I'd say Sophia Flörsch is really quite an inspirational person at the moment, breaking the barriers and getting in, and definitely Jamie Chadwick. She won W Series, which was the female single-seater series before F1 Academy. She won that 3 times, and now she's gone to America for IndyCar next. So she's definitely someone I look up to a lot.
Yeah, and Sky Sports have just had a recent addition to their team. She's called Bernie Collins. She used to be the head of race strategy at Aston Martin, and now, like, with her providing insights on commentary and stuff, it's just so interesting to see a woman with that level of knowledge and sort of experience in the sport. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with us, and hopefully so much more will be done to make it hopefully a lot more equal.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you very much.
Although women's sport is now gaining more of a following, this hasn't always been the case, with inequality stretching to the rules of women playing sports, Nicole Tompkins joins us in the studio to tell us about the history of the female sports.
Hi girls.
Hello.
So while men have been able to compete in sport since the beginning of time really, the first time that women were allowed to compete in sports was actually in the year 55 AD in Greece. The women weren't allowed to compete in the Olympic Games but had their own version of this dedicated to the goddess Hera. Women playing football was first recorded in Scotland in 1628 when a minister complained about men and women footballing on a Sunday. The first women's golf tournament took place in 1811 in Musselburgh in Scotland. In 1884, a girl called Emily Valentine was first recorded as playing the first rugby in Ireland. The first women's hockey field club was founded in Britain in 1887. The first recorded women's football match was recorded in 1895. But the next major milestone for the women's sport was in the year 1900, where Helene de Portal of Switzerland became the first woman ever to compete in the Olympic Games as part of winning the winning team in the sailing event. The Women's Association Football was formed in 1969 and the first WFA Cup final was played in 1971. Although women's rugby was starting to be played, it was actually quite rare until the 1970s, with the Women's Rugby Football Union not being formed until 1983. The first Women's Rugby World Cup wasn't held until 1991.
Wow. That's a lot of history. Thank you for that, Nicole. You've definitely done your research.
I have indeed.
It's not just the players that are campaigning to make sport more equal. Her Game too is campaigning to make the experience for fans more enjoyable. We spoke to Ellie Mollinson about her involvement in the charity.
Her Game 2 is a campaign launched by female fans for female fans. It initially started as a campaign to end sexism in football, and now it has expanded into cricket, rugby, and across all fields of also playing and broadcasting. I think the stigma in one way is when they get back to the kitchen. This isn't for you. This is for the lads. Very, very old-fashioned way of thinking. But there's that one. And then there is also, which I think is probably the more prominent one in modern day football, is just complete sexualization of female football fans. It's almost like a niche, and unfortunately it has been used very much like if you're at football, you're someone's boyfriend. You're not there for you. Or if you're watching football, you're not watching the football, you're watching the men. I've had an incident and one of the players, and instead of assuming that I was a fan, because he could see that I was clearly trying to figure out how to get the confidence to speak to the player to ask for a photo, but I didn't want to interrupt his day. I was, figuring it out in my head, and you could see that I was making that decision. And he came over to me and then took me over to that player and told that player that I actually wanted to sleep with him. And I couldn't hear what he said. He took me over to the table and whispered in that player's ear. And naturally, the player was like, no, because his girlfriend was also sat right next to him. And it was just so humiliating because I had no idea that he'd said that. He never told me he was going to tell that player. And when you idolize someone, it's nasty. But it was just an example of how sexualized female fans are. It's kind of almost endless, what Her Game 2 is doing. It's amazing, really, because it was only May 2021 that it was launched, and they've already gone international and expanded into other sports. But the main things are the reporting systems, the dedicated fixture, and raising awareness. Sexism is taught. It's a learned behaviour. You're not born sexist. You're not born believing that all women are sexual objects or cannot play sport, or it's just humorous to see things like that. That's a learned behavior, and it comes from a number of places. Some people use being a female football fan or pretend to be a female football fan as their way to get extra likes, but in a very sexualized manner, or as a way to get extra views or subscriptions and things like OnlyFans. And it just means that real female football fans aren't believed. I find a lot of the time I get asked, oh, you're a real fan, name the players, name this, because they just can't believe it, because they've only seen female football fans sexualized. And I think it's just changing that, just not letting these young boys see these toxic ideas. In media, might be about 11% now, but it was only 5% of sports that you watch include women, which is a ridiculous statistic. And how can we, in such recent day, still have such a ridiculously low number? It's hard to aspire to be a female athlete. I think the media has a large part to play. And I think as well, it's not even just the type of how much, that's a big thing in its own. If you want to watch female sport, is it easy? No, you've got to find it.
Now, following on from International Women's Day, we decided to look at some female sporting inspirations.
The major most recent female inspirations are the Lionesses. The team won the Euros last year, which the men have failed to do in recent years. The final also saw a record-breaking number of attendees for a women's game. They have since worked hard to encourage more young girls to get involved in sport.
Alex Scott is a former footballer and sports presenter who was inducted into the Football Hall of Fame. She presented the 2018 FIFA World Cup and was the first female football pundit at a World Cup for the BBC and Sky Sports when she joined the Super Sunday team. She has spoken out about the sexist abuse she receives on social media because of her role in presenting 2020 Olympic Games alongside Claire Balding. She also wore the One Love armband in the 2022 World Cup whilst reporting the England versus Iran match, and she feels it is her responsibility to change perceptions.
Our next inspirational woman is Sarah Hunter, who is an English rugby union player. She is England's all-time most capped rugby player and recently announced she will retire after the Six Nations. She has challenged traditional societal perceptions of femininity in the sport and has helped to transport the sport to what it is today.
Fatima Whitbread was the first British athlete to set a world record in a throwing event. She achieved this at the 1986 European Athletics Championships.
Tanni Gray-Thompson is a Paralympic wheelchair racer. She won 2 gold medals in the Paralympic Games in Athens in 2004, and she was also the first ever female wheelchair user in the world to present on television and is a huge ambassador for many different organisations.
Varsity 2023 took place this week at the University of Salford, which saw a number of female athletes play amazing matches. We are joined by one of these athletes, Niamh Crowley, who is a badminton player for the university. Hi Niamh, thank you for joining us. Tell us why you started to play badminton.
So I started badminton when I was about 9 years old. My older brother plays as well. So then when we were collecting from his training sessions, I saw them playing and I asked my mum, can I try that out? Because I was already playing tennis since I was about 5, so I took it up quite easily. And then at the time, there was loads of other kids my age doing it, so it was really fun to pick up.
Amazing. While playing, have you ever faced any challenges because you are a woman in the sport?
I think one of the biggest challenges is the numbers of girls in badminton. Especially for team events and trainings. Like a lot of the time, if we're making up a team, we'd struggle to get the numbers of girls that we need for the team, and then sometimes we wouldn't have the backup. Like say if one of the women was injured, then we'd be at another huge disadvantage. We wouldn't have the subs to come in and play for them. Especially at varsity, we were supposed to have 6 girls, but we only had 4. So then we had to not count 2 of our matches, but we still managed to pull through and win anyways, but it's
well done for
unfortunate.
that. Wow. Do you think that enough is being done to tackle equality in sports?
I think there definitely can be more done. In badminton, I think maybe try to introduce more kind of girls only sessions, because when I was younger, I got to an age where at some trainings I was the only girl there, so I can imagine if another girl was starting it could be a bit intimidating, whereas I was just always used to it. But I think maybe starting more sessions to get more girls involved, kind of just to not have them feeling intimidated walking in, just have it like light-hearted, not serious, and then maybe if they want to start competing, then to start training more seriously then. Yeah,
no, definitely. I think as well, like, that'd be so good to get it more equal, and like you said, you were by yourself, and there's not much representation for women in the sport. And well, saying that, do you have any female sporting heroes that have inspired you within badminton?
Trying to
or
think.
Just sports in general.
In badminton, my mum kind of has done a lot, to be fair. She's done a lot to encourage women in sport. She's won an award for trying to get more women in sport. She's done a lot. But then when I was younger, I used to follow a badminton player called Chloe McGee. She's an Irish badminton player. And then I met her when I was about 10. She played in the Olympics, and I think she won a bronze medal a good few years ago. And then I was following her when I was younger, and then I think she's doing a lot now to encourage more young, especially teenage girls, to try and commit to badminton and try and compete at a higher level as well.
Well, that's amazing that you've got them women, but that also does kind of show like how little women there is in the sport, I guess, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, it's amazing what you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much for talking to us as well, and well done for your win at varsity as well. That's all for today's show, so thank you so much for watching.
And have a lovely Easter. Bye.